All right, so this video is about buying your first muscle car, your entry level or higher end level, whatever it is, but what to look for and picking out a car. So I started doing this business, I would say in 2012, I first started doing this. It was a hobby, it was just my cars, and then had friends that had Chevelles and Mustangs and Camaros, and they said, "Hey, you mind working on my car?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." One thing led to another, and started doing some minis, started charging, and then we kind of grew and kind of became a third job for Trish and I. Now she has to help me. She's here at Canada, of course. So now it's a business along with our other corporate jobs that we have. So I wanted to share this with everybody about the experiences I've seen with my clients and the cars that they bought, whether it be from certain dealerships that do nothing but classic cars, antique cars, or certain auctions I won't name. So one of the first things you need to do is, well, what kind of car do I want? Muscle car, classic car, what it may be. You're going to have a car that's going to really, some people are just, they're passionate about a Mustang, or they could be passionate about a first gen Camaro, or like me, a Mopar guy, maybe always want a Charger or something. You could be a Pontiac or an Oldsmobile or a GS. I like all of them, to be honest with you. But you kind of figure that out. Now, there are certain cars that are just going to be more expensive than other cars. You're not going to go, a Hemi Cuda is not going to be the same amount as a small block 68 Camaro. That's just an ordinary car. There are certain cars, or a Shelby is not going to be in the same price range as a Duster. I mean, it's just the way it is, right? An LS6 Chevelle, a real one, it's not going to be the same price as a ordinary super sport. So you've got your holy grail cars, but let's just say you pick one out and you decide to go to, whether it be a dealership, I would caution on that, or an auction. I would say the best place to go to buy a classic car is the car clubs, first of all. Facebook has clubs for Pontiacs, Corvettes, Mopars, Chevys, everything. Well, you find that car, you decide you want, you talk to somebody that has that car. First thing you need to do is you walk up to that car and you want to check the metalwork, the body. Now, look, these cars are 50 years old, okay? Finding a muscle car, any of them that is a completely rust-free and the metal is all perfect, is pretty hard to come by. It can still happen. It still happens, but not like it used to. They've been picked over pretty hard. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go back on any of the old cars. You want to go back and look at the quarter panels. The quarter panels, they're going to be, you want to look all up in here, and you will look in here. And they can be covered in Bondo for 20 years, 30 years. So you want to take one of those plastic, pliable magnets, and Chris Birdsong from Junker Up on YouTube is the one that taught me this. Don't get a strong magnet. Get one of the little ones that's just real flimsy, and then just put it on there. If it sticks, you're probably in pretty good shape. You want to get under that car, look and see for any rot, any kind of rust on that car, anywhere. Now, these old 60s cars and 70s cars and even 50s cars, they had drip rails on them. And one place when they would drain water, water would set up. It'd set and drain and get down in here into the rockers. The rocker panels could be rusted out. If you look in the back, this is called, they call them different things. I think Mopar calls this a filler panel. Sometimes GM may call it a cell panel. I don't know, but back in the back, all of them, this little area right here where the chrome sets, they will rust out. All of them will. You'll find rust all in this area, and it depends on how bad it gets. It finds its way. It'll go down into the extensions, down into the trunk extensions, rot the whole trunk out. You may have to put floor pans on it. That is a whole whole different ball of wax. You find a car that's going to have floor pans, a lot of metal work done. You're talking about a lot of money. So you better be prepared to have the money to go after and do that car, because it's starting to lose its mechanical integrity really fast. Another place to look is on the cowl on these old cars. And it depends on where they come from. They rusted. They weather in different ways, and it depends on what part of the country they come from. But on your cowl, on your firewall, you'll find rust where they make firewall replacements for these cars because they would rust so bad. They just weren't made to. They didn't design these cars back then. They were trying to sell them. They didn't design them to last 50 years and not rust out. They just didn't. Now, if one of these cars had been garage kept and was never on salt roads, and well, that's a different story. This red Cuda, I'm lucky it was just always garaged all its life. It's just got a ton of door dings. So that's one of the first things you want to look at. Now, here's what's one of the biggest overlooked things on a truck. One of these old classic cars or trucks is the wiring. People will go in and they'll put a new engine, transmission, paint job, but yet the thing breaks down every now and then or just willy-nilly because the wiring harness was never replaced. If you want to burn a car down to the ground, just keep driving it with the old wiring harness. Because what happens is eventually this conduit in these old cars, it becomes brittle. Well, once it's weathered, it'll start getting brittle and it'll break. It loses continuity. The alternator won't charge. It creates all kinds of havoc. So the wiring harness is another major thing you've got to look at. And everybody's afraid of wiring. I used to be. I'm not anymore at all. Once somebody taught me how easy it is on these, especially these old cars. Another thing, good grief. I've had cars that were beautiful and they got to me and the wiring and everything's great, but they were dangerous to drive because the steering box was never rebuilt or replaced. On the old cars, they had a steering box, not rack and pinion, they had a steering box. That's a manual steering box, but some of them are power. There's a worm gear in there, and it's adjustable. But after so many thousands of miles, that steering box gets worn out, and it becomes where it's no longer safer to drive. So you want to definitely replace that steering box. And if you've got the engine out of the car, good grief, why not? When you can sit there and turn the wheel back and forth like this, that's the way you check. Have somebody get in there and just start turning that steering wheel and see how much it takes to turn that wheel before you see the wheels in front start moving. If it takes a lot like this right here and the wheels just barely turn like this, you either got a major suspension problem with your bushings and your ball joints, or you got a steering box problem. Best thing to do is look down there at the steering link and see where it's moving in relation with the steering box. That's a big one. Now, get into the drivetrain. I had a customer that he went to one of these prestigious dealerships, and this guy worked hard. He's a military veteran, flies helicopters, and he found the blue Chevelle he'd always wanted, and the guy works hard, man. He makes great money, but he earns it. So he goes to these places, spends a lot of money on this big block Chevelle, and I think he drove it for about 45 minutes and started knocking. Well, they cobbled the engine together, basically. They put a flat tappet cam that had roller valve springs in it, and it flattened the cam after about 45 minutes. Well, as you know, when you flatten a cam, it puts metal shavings in the engine, so it has to be completely rebuilt. So we did a disposition on the disassembly and teardown process, and he ended up getting some of his money back. But those are the type of things. I had a good friend of mine went to one of these auctions, and he bought an A12 Super B fully restored concourse restoration car, and it is super awesome. And he bought a 1970 Superbird. As you can imagine, I won't tell the number, but it was a huge number he paid for those two cars. Again, he's an executive, but he works hard for his money. I don't give a damn. People don't realize executives, they spend a lot of time traveling and going places. And he had the cars delivered from another state down to Texas, gets them off of the truck, and one of them, the tail lights, none of the tail lights worked, and it would die just intermittently. That was the Super B, the A12 car. The Superbird was not drivable because the power brake booster had failed. So it was rock hard on the brakes and it couldn't stop. So you're not going to drive it. You can imagine a 1970 Superbird. You're not going to drive it around without brakes. So we had to get a Bendix booster for that. And the wiring harness on the Super B, it wasn't that it was in that bad a shape. Somebody had failed to replace the bulkhead connector. So you would just wiggle it and it would start. So I could go on and on. I had another friend, had a beautiful 1970 Chevelle, and he had a big block in it. And he took it to a place, spent a ton of money having them build a Brodix big block Chevy stroker for the Chevelle. They sell him the Brodix block, the Brodix heads. I mean, this thing really didn't belong to a street car, I wouldn't think, but it looked like a mosquito truck, he said, driving it from that place. And they did him wrong. And it came to us, and we built the engine for it. So those are some things to look for. Those are the basics. If you don't have any kind of, if you don't feel comfortable, obviously you want to check, see if it smokes, rattles, knocks. Those are the obvious things. Check the windshield wipers, blinkers, all that for roadworthiness. And you need to drive it. You need to see how safe it is. Those are obvious things. But if you don't feel comfortable knowing everything you need to know, then get somebody that does know, or hire somebody. Or, I've had people that paid me to go verify certain cars. I'm not an expert on Shelbys or certain other cars. I'm pretty good with Mopars. So I've been paid to go inspect cars, Hemi cars. But it's before you get burned. I've heard the horror stories out there where cars have been cloned and they were supposed to be a GTO, but they were actually a Le Mans, or somebody tried to sell something that was a Roadrunner, but it was really a satellite. So you also got to know your VIN numbers. You got to know your VIN, your tags, like on these cars. The VIN we've got on the dash, it's going on this one. You need to know how to decode that car. I'm telling you. So before you go spend all that money, talk to somebody that's, an expert in one of those types of cars. My friend Kevin actually owns this car. He's an Oldsmobile expert. And if I were to go buy a 442 or some type of Oldsmobile in the muscle car era, Kevin would be with me because he knows more about Oldsmobiles than most people I know. So I have a friend, Larry. He's a Pontiac expert. You bet I'd be paying Larry. He would know everything there was to know about that car. Again, and then you have your Shelby people, and you got your folks that know Yinkos. The list goes on. So I can sit here forever. So please, before you get burned, that's probably one of the biggest percentage of our clients are customers that got burned and they end up here, and we have to go in and make everything right. So that's it. Buying your first muscle car. Just want to share everything that really quick that I've learned over doing this now for 12 years and what I've seen. So hope everybody has a good day.